The following is a case study on someone I cursed 2 years ago. Normally when black magician curses, once the hex is activated, we never heard of it again. We expect the worst on our victim, but we rarely found out what happened. This case is different. I've received some updates on that black magic curse, and was able to track how that curse manifested in someone's life. My spirit guide had asked me to share the information. This is meant to be used as a case study on black magic. The story is 100% true. All identifiable details were altered to protect the identity of the people involved. Before we begin, I just want to say I don't like to curse people. Hexes are real, and I've seen it destroyed lives and families. Having said that, in cases of self-defense, and on a last resort basis, like the story I am about to share, I believe it is right to do whatever it takes to stand your ground. The events of what led up the curse need to be told in discretion, because more than one victim was involved, and some lingering court proceedings are still being processed these days. I can tell you I felt my life was in danger. The police were called multiple times, and at the end I was granted a long-term restraining order against this guy. Some regulars of this channel are also my friends. You may remember I mentioned I survived a murder attempt during that time frame, and bits and pieces of this story had already been told to my inner circle, so you can attest to the truthfulness to this story. The perpetrator, let's call him Ted, had been harassing us for about 2 weeks. The police were called multiple times, each time they left without making an arrest. It was very frustrating due to the limited legal options afforded to us. I was working with my protection patron, Angel Samael, whom at the time, I have a lot of experience working with, mostly with clients who needed curses removed. At one point, Samael asked me to perform a very potent curse spell on this guy. I was reluctant at first, but as the situation deteriorates, I followed the Archangel's advice and performed the curse. Not going into details on how I curse people, the description is probably against YouTube's community guidelines. All I can say was I was in survival mode, so I used all the destructive power in the universe to hex this guy, and just like all the powerful ritual I ever done. Poof, nothing happened. He came back and harassed us again the next day. The police was called again. They said there is nothing they can do, leaving us to die a painful death. But wait, this time around, the police came back. The leading sergeant had actually left the building, on his way to his squad car, then was literally radio intercepted with new marching order. The captain from the police department said to bring in Ted, not for a criminal charge, but for a mandatory 72-hour psychiatric evaluation. That means they were to take Ted away to the mental hospital for a few days. And just like that, my nightmare ended in an instant. Ted being involuntarily confined to a mental hospital was a big reason why the court granted me that restraining order. So thanks to Samael, I've defeated my enemy. The end. Not so fast. There is always more to my stories. As mentioned before, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the mechanics of a curse ritual. Instead, I want to focus on the transformation of Ted before and after the hex, and the long-term effect of a heavy curse on an individual. Ted was a 38-year-old professor of humanities at a prestigious university. He held a PhD from a very competitive program. He came from wealthy, established, well-to-do family, with a deep tie to the South. Ted was tall, relatively handsome, top of the world when I met him. He is a soft-spoken Southern gentleman, very considered with his words. That was the reason why the police never able to arrest him, because he was so good with words. You know, the classic narcissistic psychopath. The type who likes to torment his victim, then flip the switch and become Prince Charming, and blame the victim for making accusations to such a meekly mannered Southern gentleman. So what happened after I hexed Ted with a potent curse? Back to the event after the night he got taken away by the police. His stay at the mental hospital was extended for 2 months after the 72-hour mandatory evaluation, which is very rare. For those of you who are familiar with Americans' mental health system, patients are usually hurried out the door. He must have demonstrated a clear danger for himself or society before a psychiatrist would recommend a stay. The hospital he stayed was a general hospital with a psychiatric wing. It is not the country club mental hospital you find in a glossy brochure. This mental hospital was old, without windows, poorly ventilated with overworked angry nurses, overall a highly unpleasant way to spend your day. A few months later, I received a death threat email from Ted. The email was anonymously sent, but I was able to prove that it was from him. The death threat read something like his life is completed, ruined because of what I've done, followed by some nonsense death threats. The interesting part was not death threat. I have the restraining order and he can't come near me. The interesting part, how he told me his life was ruined. It was as if Samael had tapped me on the shoulder and let me know the hex was working. I did some research. So after his stint at the mental hospital, he was unable to find a job, and unable to find housing with that arrest record. He was staying in Airbnb for a while. With his personality, he was blacklisted from using the app. I also noticed he was unable to use any rideshare like Uber or Lyft. Must have been the same story. He was just bouncing around hotels and motels, spending his family's money because he was unemployed, and he was a big spender, so he quickly squandered whatever family fortune he inherited. About a year from the incident, I got a call from my state's district attorney's office. They said they were filing felony charges against Ted, and asked me for my cooperation. I knew there were warrants for his arrest, so I imagine his trip to the courtroom was a highly unpleasant one. Personally, I didn't want to press charges, but there were other victims from that incident, and I can't speak for them. The charges were pressing forward in regardless to my preference. Words on the street was that there were other victims from before. Once they found out Ted was arrested, his aura of invincibility was torn down. More victims spoke up. Apparently, Ted had a habit of targeting young Asian female students for his abuse. I knew he worked as a private tutor for students as young as 12 years old, kids with tiger parents who believe Ted can get their children into a top 10 college. Now that Ted don't hold that power over their head anymore, civil and criminal cases began to pile up against Ted. Ted came from a well-to-do family. Ted himself had genius-level intelligence, but the legal odds were stacked against him. Ted had a good legal team defending him. Lawyers are not cheap. His legal trouble was burning through his family's fortune. Earlier this year, I learned that his parents had filed for bankruptcy, so Ted is on his own to face the legal system. It had been 2 years since I casted that hex spell on Ted. He was at the time a dashing professor from a prestigious university, living off a generational fortune, with the support of an upper-crust, well-connected, old-money family. After the hex, I saw him transformed into a homeless man, completely unemployable, completely drained of his family's fortune and support, entangled knee-deep in legal mess stretching multiple jurisdictions. He clearly aged ungracefully in the last 2 years. Gone was the baby-faced southern gentleman, replaced by a swollen, heavily wrinkled, haggard face. It was like he just turned 72 years old from 38. It is unlikely Ted will ever be employed by any schools, let alone holding the prestigious position he held before. Along with a new court order to stay away from children, it is doubtful he can ever hold a job again. At one point before the hex, he must have had some career aspirations to be a great scholar, sipping tea on the ivory tower, mingling with society's elite. He had gone from that upper echelon life to basically eating out of a garbage can for the rest of his life. Do I feel bad about hexing Ted after knowing what happened to him? I feel bad that any human being had to be homeless and penniless. I do think the misfortune Ted experiences right now was brought on by himself. From what I gathered, at the time I met Ted, he was transitioning out of his university position into working full-time at an Asian tutorial company, which catered mostly to exchange students. If that were to happen, meaning had Ted gotten that job, it would have been really horrible for many young people, many of whom would be new to the country, barely speak English, and without the ability to defend themselves. So, what have we learned from this case study from a black magician's perspective? First, If you cast a protection spell or even a curse spell, you still need to do your part to fight your bully. Trust that the spirit will come and intervene at the right moment, usually when you least expect. Second, curses take time to develop. It is never one mishap you can point to and say that's the result of the curse, but over time, you will see a transformation in the recipient's life. The spirit has a way to dish out the most painful punishment. Thirdly, sometimes your spirit guide will put Black Magician in a position where you have to take defensive action. It is part of your development as a practitioner. Black magicians were advisors to kings on war and statecraft. In the past, wizards rode into battle alongside with his king, so hexes and curses were practiced alongside with magic of the noblest of intention. In this case, I think it worked out for the positive. On a side note, I was talking to Archangel Samael on the subject of karma. I said maybe it was Ted's karma what caught up to him. All those people he had abused now came back to haunt him. Samael said something profound. He said Ted had stepped on the toes of too many guardian angels, and without the hex, Ted would only become more brazen. Samael hinted Ted was destined to do a lot of damage had he not had that run-in with the law. In another timeline, there would have been a lot more shattered lives. I suppose I owe a whole video's worth of discussion on the nature of Archangel Samael. Samael is my protection patron, which means he handles all my protection, both astral protection from hexes and curses, to physical protection from enemies and bullies. He is very powerful, at times, too powerful. If you are not careful, he will blow away the things you are trying to protect. I can tell you for sure, unlike what religious cleric wants you to believe. Samael is not, I repeat, not Satan or Lucifer. Samael is not a demon. Samael was not Lilith's husband. That marriage was from a novel written in 1st century AD. Samael is a seraphim angel, one of the most combat-able type of celestial spirit. He is not big compared to giants unlike Belial or Barakiel. He is built more like a martial artist, not huge, but very agile, moves fast, and very skilled in fighting. He just told me he was the patron of ancient Sparta, and trained Spartan on their military skills. Samael is a good spirit to work with, but him being mostly seraphim made his intervention very chaotic. You just need to trust that he will come through at the end, even though your world might be falling apart waiting for Samael's intervention. Have you worked with Samael before and have a story to tell? Or maybe you hexed someone and things didn't go the way you envisioned. Please share your story in the comment section below. Please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Click on the bell button so you will never miss a video again. I really need your help to grow this channel. It will be much appreciated.